Hey there everybody, it's Mark Crilley. I'm back with another How to Draw video. Today we're going to be learning how to draw a kitten's face. Now, this is going to be a little bit like this video I did some time ago of drawing a wolf's face. On that one I focused a lot on the line placement and raced through the fur, the shading in that last part. This time we're going to kind of flip that around. I want to move through the line placement pretty quickly so that we can spend more time on showing you how to draw fur. So, let's go ahead and get into a few basic guidelines. Okay, so this is the basic shape of the head here, and I'm going to be drawing this kitten sort of in a 3/4 point of view. And just notice that the basic shape of the head is, considerably wider than it is tall. Because it is a 3/4 point of view, the chin, which is, a very subtle kind of, it's not indentation, I used to say outdentation. Protrusion. The chin, very subtle in its shape here, the contour, is just a little shifted over to the left. And I've left quite a lot of gaps up here because this is where the ears are going to go, and no time like the present. Let's draw those ears. Alright, so we've got the ears in place here, and, from the photos that I studied, I noticed, as you would expect, a very triangular shape, but I noticed a sort of secondary tuft of fur area down here at the bottom. And then eventually there'll be a sort of secondary line across here, the sort of edge of the tops of the ears. Let's go ahead and place the eyes, the nose, and the mouth. Alright, well, we've got the eyes here. Notice how small they are relative to the rest of the head. And I'd put them about halfway, maybe a touch closer to the bottom than the top, more or less halfway. But again, with this 3/4 view, this eye that's a little closer to us appears larger than the other eye. Notice the gap between the eyes for placing the nose. And then again, pay attention between the chin and the mouth. Now, we have this idea of a cat having this sort of, rounded shape down here, but when I looked at photographs, I pretty much never saw that clearly delineated. So we are going to try to keep it realistic here and just leave it with these downward sloping lines. Well, let's draw the lines for the neck, and then just a few lines for some of the patterns that are going to occur in the fur. Alright, now the first thing you may notice is that the neck seems quite wide. Well, these are not actually the lines of the neck in a way. They're sort of the lines of where the fur ends up stopping. The actual neck of the cat is probably much smaller. And then these lines that are indicating patterns in the fur, that's going to change a lot from one cat to the other. So, if you want to follow along with this in a step-by-step way, by all means, feel free to place them exactly as I have, but you can also feel free to play around with it, come up with your own patterns. Anyway, let's zoom in and let's start working on shading in the eyes. Now, this cat's eyes are looking pretty bugged out right now, like someone slipped a little caffeine into the milk. So my job now is to kind of tame that wild look in the eyes. I'm putting in indications of highlights, and I think what I ought to do, I guess I'll just, for the first, for this thing with the highlights, I'll show you both eyes. But from now on, I'm just going to do all my work on the one eye, and then I'll do this other one in time lapse. So as I looked at photographs again of kittens, I noticed that there was a big, bold, black outline around the eyes, just as what I had seen when I did the wolf, and I think it does sort of serve a purpose. A lot of people were leaving comments in terms of how this helps keep the sun out of the eyes. Maybe like, an American football player will do the same kind of thing. So make sure if you are trying to keep your drawing realistic that you get this outline in here pretty bold, Now, the pupil of a cat famously can sort of dilate in different ways and end up with different shapes. This one is fairly open wide the way I'm doing it right now. And I guess what I'll do is start to do a little bit of shading here. I'm going to have to switch from this Dixon Ticonderoga to a black Prismacolor to get the really deep blacks that I want to get. And again, this is going to be kind of a challenging video to fit all into a single video without it going really, really long. So I may have to do a lot of time lapse. Sorry, guys. I know some of you don't like it. But notice that I'm adding a little extra tone around the bottom edge here. And then, even with human eyes, you'll find that very often the darkest area of the iris is toward the top, gradually getting lighter as it goes down. So, actually, I think I will switch right now to the black Prismacolor to give you some sense of how that can really darken in the pupil in a nice way that makes it pop and look more believable. And the same sort of jet black color that I'm applying to the pupil will also go into that outline that I was talking about that goes all the way around the eye. Now, as I said, I'm a little concerned with this video going super, super long. So I'm going to do a few little final touch-ups on this eye here in time-lapse, and then also apply the same technique all in time-lapse to this other eye. Alright, so now we're going to move down to the nose, and I'll get at least the basic structure of this done in real time. It does indeed look quite a bit like a triangle, as it is normally rendered in cartoon style, but there may be a little bit of a dip here, and not necessarily in the structure of the nose, but in the area where the fur begins to come off of it. So I'm putting that in there. And then one thing that I noticed that I thought was quite interesting is that the nostril is, right here on the side of our triangle, but then on some cat breeds anyway, there's a slit that goes right up here on the edge. And then because the cat is in 3/4 view, you're not going to see that so clearly over here, neither the nostril nor that little slit, but it is quite clear on this one side. And then it comes down, quite like a triangle, really. It's rather like a triangle, isn't it? And all my English viewers, Mark, stop! No, don't do the English accent. It's terrible. But this is going to get darkened in, probably more with the Prismacolor later on. And you might do some light shading here. I like to try to make it a little darker at the bottom so as to convey some three-dimensionality. Although cats, I don't think, have a shiny nose quite the same way that a dog does, or Rudolph, for that matter. Worst joke I've ever made, probably. Let's move down here, and as I was saying, there is not that sort of curved shape, and this whole area of the mouth in the photographs that I studied, very subtle. There might be a little darkness here where the mouth is, mostly obscured, unless, of course, it's open, wide open or something like that. But we'll be doing some shading later on. Otherwise, though, this is pretty much all you have to draw down here. I'll hold off on doing the black Prismacolor dark lines until later on in the drawing process. But now I want to get into the most important part of this lesson, and that is the fur. Let's go ahead and start jumping into it right here. I'm going to get a couple of basic guidelines here in place. I don't know if you'd call them guidelines, but we begin to do some rough indications of the fur that give us a sense of the structure of the nose. And again, it's interesting as I look back on the one that I did of the wolf not so long ago, you find that the fur across the snout, across the nose area is very, very short, to the point where you can't, when you're trying to draw it, you almost cannot draw the individual hairs, unless you're really coming in super close. Super close up. But as we come up here, you're going to be able to see, lines that show the direction. But basically, if you got down there with a magnifying glass or something, you would see that they are going in a very vertical, the hair is growing in a very vertical direction, up across the snoutal region. I'll just make up any words I want to, people. I don't even care anymore. And then some of the cats that I saw would have a pattern that sort of comes from the tear duct area across, sort of joining the eye area down with the nose area. And that's pretty much going to be it for that. Let's see if I should, I guess the camera, I'll readjust the focus of the camera just a second. Now, as I said, this has the potential to become an incredibly long video, and so I'm going to try to cover certain areas in real time before kicking it into time lapse. So I had done this sort of M shape here just to kind of get myself started, but the truth is this whole upper area is going to be fairly darkened in to different degrees, but there's a white area around the upper edge of the eyes, and I'm just going to sort of loosely cordon off that area that down here is going to remain basically white, and the same goes for over here as well. Again, different kittens are going to have different fur patterns and so forth, but at least some breeds seem to have a white area just above the eyes and also below it. I guess I might as well do the same thing here. I always use the phrase roping off. I feel like I'm roping off this area, saying, okay, no pencil marks in these white areas, and then I'll know where to put all the other shading. But you do want to start to pay attention to the direction of the fur, because as I said before, it's basically going in a vertical direction, and the hair is getting steadily more visible as it gets longer. But as it comes across, and I guess I'll go over in this direction to begin with, it begins to fan out in a more of a diagonal direction. Now the hair is not super long at this stage yet, so I'm keeping my lines pretty short as I gradually work my way toward final line work on the fur. But as you get up towards the ears, that's where the hair really starts to get long, and maybe I'll shift the camera to do a separate section on the ears. Get some interesting patterns, again, at least in the photos I saw, where this area begins to divide into, gray and then sort of a more blackened in area. I'm loosely following that original M guideline that I'd put there at the beginning, but I'm sort of allowing myself the freedom to reinterpret the M. Maybe it should be a W. Let's throw caution to the wind. I'm lapsing back, and what is with the English accent today? Is there something about kittens that makes me go English? I'm not sure. I know that the English love their pets. When I was over there last year, and I saw them taking walking the dogs all over the place. Boy, am I going off on a tangent. Mark, this has nothing to do with teaching people how to draw. But let's get back to it. The direction of the fur becomes pretty important, especially across here as we get further and further, to the right of that forehead area. It begins to really start to go more horizontal. And then kind of you can start to detect a pattern of a curving pattern across here as it curves up towards the ears. And like I said, there's no way that I can show you every single last line that I do. I'm going to have to skip over some parts of it, but basically this gets you started on that fur area above, in the forehead. I'm going to shift the camera now so that we can talk about the fur of the ears. Now, I'm not a big fan of drawing guidelines and then completely erasing them later on, but in a way, this line here almost doesn't even need to be seen anymore, because what happens, and this was a bit of a surprise to me, at least with a lot of breeds of cats, you will find a lot of fur, very long, fluffy fur, right here, seemingly inside the ear, or maybe it's just in front of it. And, so I put that in there sort of to give myself a sense of the structure of the head. But you really don't see the structure of the head, at least in, again, the photos that I was studying. You see quite a big tuft of fur that is white fur, in this case, in front of the ear. And then what you end up doing is drawing the sort of darkness of the area behind that fur. So I'm trying as best I can in real time to show you how this area back here is the area that's going to start getting shaded. And I've, at least one kitten photo that I looked at had sort of two areas, two directions, not one direction, but two. Mark, please don't make references to One Direction in the videos. Very divisive, I'm sure, among my viewers. In any case, the fur is going in two directions. We got one area coming across here, and then another area, another direction that's coming up here at the bottom. And you can sort of goof around with that. But this, the darker areas back here are really that of the ear itself, which is largely obscured, or at least partially obscured by this big tuft of fur in the front. And this whole area here, I'm just going to shade in quickly. A lot of this stuff I'm going to be tightening up later on. This is the sort of darker area of the furless region of the, it's not the inner ear, but the sort of inside of the tips of the ear. I suppose the real inner ear is back behind that fur somewhere. But all of this, I feel, is going to need a lot more tightening, detail, and so forth as I move along. Well, I feel like I've kind of covered enough of this. Let's move down to like beneath the eye here and get in at least one more lesson about drawing the fur. So here's where I think understanding the direction of the fur becomes quite important. And I did notice with different breeds of cats that there seems to be a pattern of darkness that can sort of trail away from this upper corner of the eye. And all of these lines that I'm drawing are going more or less in a horizontal direction, maybe curving up just a little as they reach that edge of the head. And I made it quite round looking at the beginning, but really it's so furry that you're not going to see that roundness so much. It's all just a series of jagged lines that suggest quite a furry contour to the head of this kitten. But what I really wanted to show you, rather than going back to this ear area, was how you will find a darkened area that begins to start to fan out, and the lines start to fan downwards as you get down here. And finally they start pointing in more of a diagonal direction that's heading down to the lower right. So this is where you're really wanting to focus on the directions of your lines and making sure that it sort of makes sense. There's some sort of logic to how the fur is growing off of the face of the cat. And basically this final step of fine-tuning, for example, I may actually erase away a little bit here to suggest white fur coming in front of the darker areas. Basically, for me to show you the entire process of drawing fur would just take hours. But hopefully this video gets you some sense of how you could begin to do these, to lay in your indications of the fur on a cat drawing of your own creation. And one last area, maybe I'll just do one final thing without actually drawing the entire thing, just to give you a sense of the fur beneath the chin. So down here beneath the chin of the cat, it gets quite furry indeed, and there's almost like a sort of necklace of fur that comes across here and begins to join with the rest of the fur of the body. So I'm sort of continuing along here, and it comes all the way back like so until we reach this back of the neck. Again, I'm doing this very loosely. I'm going to be tightening this all up later on, but I just want you to get a sense of the sort of directions, the general direction of your lines. And again, depending on the breed of the cat, it can get quite furry back here. And it's just a matter of patience, of sort of building it up little by little. And basically what I was finding as I looked at photographs was that this area down here, by shading it in just a little bit, you can suggest the chin without actually drawing a dark line around it. The more realistic you want your drawing to be, the fewer actual black lines you're going to see around anything in the drawing. Really, it's just adjusting different tones and so forth. And I suppose the last thing that I should talk about, although this is not going to be my final way of doing it, is the whiskers, which, as you would expect, generally coming down, curving downward like so. But I found that maybe one or two of the whiskers would curve in a opposite direction, like that. So you get maybe one or two that are curving up, and that sort of adds another level of realism. Now, if you have a relatively clean eraser, you can actually use the eraser to suggest white, the whiteness of a whisker. And you can see that this requires a good eraser and quite a lot of patience, because sometimes you're going to have to kind of work back in here to tighten up the shading to show that what you've tried to do there is create a white whisker that's passing in front of the darkness below it. And this is very time consuming to you're drawing individual hairs here, basically, and I really will have to do that kind of thing in time-lapse. But I think you've kind of got the basic idea now of the various regions of the cat's face, the kitten, I should say. And let me know what you thought of this video. It is a challenge to do, realistic furry animals like this. Very hard to do most of it real time. You do have to sort of skip over things at some point. But I feel like I've kind of covered most of it. So let's go ahead and pull the camera back, and I'm going to kick it into a prolonged time-lapse here. Rev up my time-lapse machine and finish off with this drawing. Alright, well, we've kind of reached the end of the process here. I decided to take things further, spend a lot of extra time on this polishing phase, just to show you the possibilities when you're patient at the end of the process. I really do think I need to do some kind of a video that focuses exclusively on this polishing phase. Going to have to figure out a way of doing that. But in the meantime, let me thank anyone who has supported me by getting any of my books. We've got Brody's Ghost, book 4. It's out. I'm hearing from people who have it. I haven't got my comp copies yet, but they should be coming any day now. Miki Falls, and as well, Mastering Manga, my How to Draw book. I do greatly appreciate anyone who supports me by picking up any of those books, and of course just by watching the videos, leaving comments, subscribing, all that good stuff. But let's lay down this pencil. I want to thank everyone for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll be back with another one real soon.